Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk H.P. Lovecraft. Let's jump right into it. Today's short story review is of Hypnos, written March 1922, published May 1923 in National Amateur. The story is 4 or 5 pages long. It's about an unnamed sculptor living in England who tells the tale of meeting a man on the streets and then why they moved in together and began this interesting journey together. They move in to a flat where the sculptor works, but they spend most of the time taking drugs and trying to dream because they believe they can use the drugs and the sleep to explore further and further into the inner and outermost cosmos. The other man seems to be more experienced in these travels and having greater control over his movements and his over his mind, and he's always one step ahead of the narrator. One night they travel apparently too far. They sort of, the other man passes through a barrier through which the other man cannot penetrate, and he witnesses some sort of horror from which he will not speak of. After this, they become paranoid and adamant that they don't do this anymore. They don't want to further challenge whatever beings, whatever entity they have encountered. They begin to sleep less, they begin to go out and party more, and basically try to be in crowds, places where they're not alone, where they feel they would be in less danger from retribution, from whatever entity they apparently have offended from breaking into his realm. The drug use begins to show on their bodies. They begin to age prematurely. They become less healthy, and the other man begins to feel paranoia. He feels this sense that there's something watching him from a certain point in space, which the narrator says to be called Corona Borealis. And then one night, the other man, he falls asleep in their apartment there, and sort of in what is described as, I would say, like a light that does not illuminate, sort of a red light, falls down on the man from space, and the narrator, he shrieks in horror and passes out. When he comes to, the police have come, and where he believes his friend should be sitting is only his most brilliant carved creation yet, which is a bust of this man's head. And the police, however, they're not looking for the man because they know that the man did not exist and that our narrator was a drug user and an unreliable narrator. Very interesting little story. Not entirely original. I kind of feel like I'm familiar with more tales like this, including some by Lovecraft himself. But it covers some really interesting themes. I think the first one is hallucinogenics. These guys are obviously tripping on something, and you could say that the bad turn of events after they pass through that veil would be like a bad trip. And yet we know that over centuries, various cultures, even right down to present times, people have used hallucinogenics as a way to have good experiences and to free their minds and to expand their minds and to have interactions that are otherwise not possible in our waking world. So there is that line. But the other thing is, of course, schizophrenia. We know that this man, this narrator, basically dreamed up a person that nobody else can see, and then later, that dream person feels like he's being persecuted, being watched from beyond by another being. So there's obviously a mental health issue here as well. And then third and finally, stories about artistic expression and the way madness and drugs and brilliance in art all seem to overlap in the real world. How many of the greatest artists were, mentally ill or eccentric or had drug issues? So there is that that line earlier, that place that Lovecraft is exploring. I don't know. I mean, he struck me as being very Puritan, so I don't really see him as a drug user. But obviously, he has an interest in this, and maybe he, wondered if, hey, if I tried some of these chemicals that are starting to come into existence in the 20th century, what will it do for my artwork? But he seems to have done pretty good for himself one way or another, because his art is living on today. But yeah, guys, it's a really interesting story that sort of deals with these issues of mental health, drug use, and artistic expression, which, I view myself as an artist, not really much into drugs, but, I've thought, many times about these overlapping themes, and you see them, they're fairly popular these days. You see them in movies, and you also see them in our real world with the most eccentric artists among us. So, yeah, guys, that was Hypnos, a short story by H.P. Lovecraft. 5 or 6 pages. It's a 10-minute read, and it's one of his better works, I would say. Despite being very vague, it really manages to give readers a lot to think about, and I highly recommend it. I think you will enjoy this story if you take the chance to read it, or maybe just check it out free on YouTube in an audiobook version, because there's several of those floating around out there as well. Alright, guys, that has been my review of Hypnos by H.P. Lovecraft. Please subscribe to our channel, and until next time, keep it creepy.